Welcome to Just One Thing for Parents. I'm Bettina Honan. I'm here today with Leonie Kenny, who is a speech and language therapist who specialises in social thinking. Leonie is one of the few people in this country who runs the PEERS program, which is an evidence-based program that supports children who struggle with social communication, often kids who are on the autism spectrum. It's a really fantastic program with lots of ideas for developing relationship skills in young people. So welcome, Leonie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
And the question for you, the Just One Thing question is, what is one thing that parents can do to support their children in developing and managing relationships?
Wow, it's a tricky one, isn't it, to sum it up in one?
Yes. So maybe start, actually, it's quite a good idea, not to start with the one, but start with just, telling us a little bit about friendships and relationships and the skills.
Well, I think friendships can be really confusing. They can be unpredictable. And I think that allowing ourselves to know that and be aware of it is good. I think it's good when we reflect on friendships to think about what we want from a friend, what our expectations are, and also think about our social perspective taking. So, what are thinking about others and how they're thinking about us, like it's a constant loop.
I think we don't always think about that. We don't stop and think about that. But as human beings, we're always bearing in mind what the other person is thinking, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah.
It's, we're in the social world as such, we're constantly having to think about what other people are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like whether it's on a bus or walking to school or sharing a classroom or being in a smaller group, it's that feedback loop is constantly going on kind of innately for most of us.
We almost can't turn it off.
Yeah, exactly.
It can be quite annoying sometimes.
Exactly. And I think, that can sometimes lead to some anxious thinking. I also think that feeling anxiety and managing anxiety is just part of us as humans.
Right.
And I think it's learning how to manage that as we approach adolescent years, because I don't know one person who hasn't at one point felt a bit socially anxious.
Yeah. What do other people think of me?
Yes.
Am I being...
how am I going to come across? And also thinking about how you want to be perceived. Is that coming across as you wish? I also think screen time and devices is huge right now.
Yes.
As, I think children and young people are trying to navigate their face-to-face communication. Yeah. And then this online, gaming world, or just whether it's using their devices, messaging friends.
How much do kids use messaging to communicate these days?
I actually read an article, but I can't remember quite where, but around 35% of young people rely on their phone and messaging to communicate.
What completely? Or
Wow. And I think a lot of the students that I work, that their phone can be almost like another limb. I think giving our attention is one of the biggest compliments we can do. So again, I think the devices and our screens and our phones aren't going anywhere, but can we teach our students to look up as well? I think that's a big part of it.
As well as look at their phones, to look up at the person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whether that's just, it doesn't have to, it could be a verbal or a non-verbal nod of the head or gaze or a verbal hello, even if it's just for greeting. But I do think maybe just within my practice, in navigating that difference and almost allocating as much time to face-to-face communication as we do to our devices and screens and phones. I think that's a powerful discussion to be had at the moment.
Gosh. So what you're saying is that developing relationship skills is something that's going on during childhood.
Yes.
And having some social anxiety is normal and natural.
Yes.
And it's part of us thinking about another person's mind and what are they thinking and what am I thinking, and understanding there might be a difference.
Yes.
And that relationships are changing maybe with the phone.
Absolutely. I think so anyway, in that face-to-face communication, how we converse, how we relate to people. I think if we're not attending, how can we interpret people? If we're looking down at the top all the time, we can't socially attend and therefore interpret. So, that then leads us on to problem solving and responding to people. So again, it's another loop.
Yeah. So I suppose the things that I often come across experienced myself, I'm sure, as a parent. It can be two extreme ends. There can be some kids who feel quite left out and quite bullied. And we could think about how parents might manage that. And then at the other end, you might have a child who you think is maybe, being a little bit unkind themselves, or they're falling out with people, or they're being a bit bossy, or and I suppose those might be a couple of things to think about. If those things are presenting, how might a parent manage those kinds of difficulties that they see in their children?
Yeah, I think that's an important word. Do they see it? Because sometimes we do have to observe these things ourselves to be able to interpret our children and young people and how they're getting on with friendships. Sometimes parents, that the problems that they had are not necessarily the problems that their children are facing. So it's important to be a bit objective about this as well. I also think if it is the case that a child or student is being left out, I think reflecting on the why that might be. And again, back to that social perspective taking, what are they doing? What could be maybe done differently?
What could they be doing differently than the one who's being left out?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, as humans, we're all egocentric. We all want others to relate to us, right? We all want to feel seen and feel heard. So is there an element where they need to initiate more or engage more in interactions? Possibly that could be one reason. I think as well, talking to their friends as well, sometimes getting a little bit of sense of feedback or checking in with people can be helpful as well. But I also think there's a sense of, we have to kind of learn through experience and repetition.
Yes.
And again, sometimes things can feel really uncomfortable. And as parents, we might want to fix that. We want to take those really uncomfortable feelings away. And sometimes you have to sit with that and figure it out. And then that is how you kind of learn and you develop the resilience. And you learn from your positive experiences, and you also learn from those that didn't go so well. So I think it's important to kind of use it as a learning experience as well, rather than jumping in too much. And I think allowing space for students to problem solve it as well and figure it out.
I suppose the thing that strikes me is it's so painful as a parent when your child is being left out, and sometimes that can put us into what I might call fight or flight or something, like we're a bit reactive. I mean, I certainly, like Mama Bear, if anyone, goes for my kids.
Yes.
Or I think somebody's going for my kids. So it can bring up a very protective side of you.
Yes.
And I suppose what you're saying is, well, we have to think about this. It's a two-way relationship. Yeah. And there might be a case where a child is really being bullied. And then some intervention is needed.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely.
But sometimes it's about saying, well, let's look at what's going on in the relationship. And what you're saying is allowing space to sit with them, not jump in and fix it or phone someone's mum or call the teacher or whatever, but to sit with it and try and problem solve with them about what they're doing, maybe what their part is.
I think so. I think, as you said, it depends on the situation, but we don't necessarily want to protect by preventing. We want to, live through that experience and figure out a way through it together.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then that then becomes a bit of a learning experience that can really stay with us in a good way.
And is there one thing for the kids who are being left out, for those parents, that you would recommend?
I think thinking about their friends and, choosing the right friends.
Yeah.
I think to be accepted is a hugely powerful thing to be, and sadly not all of our students do feel accepted. So giving some thought as to who they're spending their time with.
Yeah.
And I think careful consideration of that can go a long way. But again, sometimes that can be painful if you are being maybe rejected by a group.
Yeah.
At the same time, again, it's tuning into that. It's being aware that maybe they're not the right people for you, and choosing other friends. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a bad reflection on your student or child necessarily, but it's just tuning into choosing the right people. And again, encouraging our students to just perspective take as well. Do they have a bit of a part to play in this?
maybe going through it like, what were you thinking? What do you think they were thinking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that doesn't come intuitively or easily to some students. So it's kind of talking it through that. But doing it in a way that they're finding the solutions as well. And as well, I think our social motivation may be different to our children's social motivation. So we need to reflect on that and what friendships.
What do you mean by that? Say a bit more.
Well, I think that some children are motivated to meet and want to have a lot of friends. They like hanging out in a big group. Some students may be very, very happy with one or two friends.
Yeah.
Other people may not place a huge amount of importance on friendships at certain periods in their life. Again, as parents, it's not always what you think your child wants. It's really about tuning into their strengths and needs and their social goals rather than what you think their social goals could be.
Yeah, and inherent in that message is that all kids are different.
Completely.
Some kids want loads of friends, some just want one. Some kids want to spend a lot of time with friends.
Exactly.
Some need their own time.
Exactly.
And it may not be the same as you as a parent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Or it may not be what you think would be advantageous for that student as well.
Yeah. And with it also inherent with, I think what you're saying is this idea of having us making sure that we have a growth mindset about friendship.
Yeah.
That kids are trying things out. They're going to get things wrong.
Completely.
And we can't write kids off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, I think anxiety and sadness, they happen all the time.
Yeah.
They're a part of development. So how do we manage that as we go through the journey? It's kind of constantly evolving, isn't it?
Yes.
The social rules change from children to adolescents to adult years.
Yeah.
And there's quite a big jump as well from the adolescent years into, as we transition into working life.
Yeah.
We might get away with, I say that get away, but I think we might have difficulties self-regulating as a child. But, when we're an adult, that doesn't bode very, very well, does it?
Yeah. No.
That's when the police might be called or something.
Yeah.
So it's about, it's an evolving process, isn't it?
And we can help our kids develop those skills.
Absolutely.
So I suppose that brings us on to the next group. Like, if you think, actually, I suspect my child maybe isn't being very kind, or they're being a bit bossy, or I want to, guide them a bit more in how to do these skills. That can be tricky, can't it?
It can be really tricky, again, especially with those teenage adolescent years. Yeah. Again, I think checking in maybe in terms of their social goals.
Yeah.
What is their social motivation? How do they want to be perceived? I think is quite powerful because it's that kind of social behaviour mapping that what I do has an impact on others, which comes back to me. Again, it's that loop, social emotional chain or social behaviour mapping, however you want to call it. And I think, again, it's just being aware. Like, absolutely be yourself, but be aware that some of our actions may be perceived differently by other people.
Yeah. What do you mean by social behaviour mapping?
Well, I think it's the idea that how I behave will impact on your perception of me.
Right.
And that may impact on how you behave to me back.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So if I was to kick you right now, you might not be very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might be very sad. You could be any reasons.
Yeah.
You might kick me back, or you might be very annoyed with me.
But really breaking things down for kids in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
so
step
helpful.
by step. Yeah. Yeah.
So they can see that they might have played a part. But that's tricky as a parent. And I think
It can be.
Yeah, as you say, particularly in the teenage years.
Yeah.
When there's, the teenage years is really a sensitive or critical period for developing these social and emotional skills because of the bits of the brain that are developing at that time. And actually, at a time when we put kids in this academic tunnel of pressure, their brain is really drawing them towards social relationships and making them think about social relationships and how to develop social relationships. Sometimes I think kids just don't have enough time to think about that.
I agree. Yeah, especially in some parts of the world. The demand is there. It's there for 11 plus. It's there for 13 plus.
Yes.
It's there then to exams.
Yeah.
to get into the right uni or to proceed on to whatever world, maybe go straight into work.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes in some of my younger groups we think about social smarts and academic smarts.
Yes.
And how it's important to try and leave a bit of room for both, you know, which
Yeah.
can be a lot easier said than done.
Yeah. But I suppose as a parent, you want kids to be coming to you or to be going to somebody. And you know, it'd be great if it can be you. Maybe that's not your relationship with them, but to be coming to you and saying, I don't know, that person didn't make me feel very good. And, you know, how much, you know, kids are working out, how much do I do what they want to do and how much do I do what I want to do?
Yeah.
And that's complicated, isn't it?
It's really complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the reciprocity within friendships. You know, we're all looking to be understood, aren't we? We're looking to be seen, we're looking to be heard. But that can involve you compensating a bit in the sense that sometimes you'll have a conversation with a friend and you've no interest really in what they're saying.
Yeah.
But then vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you might want to talk about something that they don't have interest in. So it's again, it's that shared space, you know, reciprocity that we talk about.
Reciprocity, the back and forth.
Yeah.
Because we don't want kids who are being unkind and doing things on their terms, but we also don't want kids who, you know, are subjugating their needs all the time.
Absolutely.
We don't want to teach them that either, do we?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's about, again, speaking up when you need to, but also that, again, you know, involves a lot of confidence. And I think, again, the idea of giving space for this to help problem solve with your children is a good one, because I think if you hold the space, they're more likely to maybe come with you and have a chat rather than maybe always being in the kind of fixing mode, maybe.
Yeah, listening first. So if you do have a kid where you want to give them some feedback, choose your timing really carefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, do it, you know, a bit probing. Well, how do you think they might have felt when you did that? So they're kind of seeing the kind of cause and effect almost of interactions, which can be really minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, so much. Such a rich conversation. So let's try to end with, if we can come up with one thing, just one thing. You know, one kind of big bit of advice really for parents whose kids are struggling with friendships.
Maybe to hold space and try and problem solve with them.
I love that.
Yeah.
With listening first,
Yeah.
trying not to jump in with fixing,
Yeah.
focusing on the perspective taking.
Exactly. Seeing both sides, so then figure out how we respond then to that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
That was just so great. I'm sure that's going to be helpful for so many parents.
I hope so. Thank you for having me.